Hey guys, tonight we step out of the bustling, noisy streets of ancient Rome, away from the clamor of the Forum and the rumble of chariot wheels, and into a haven of quiet sanctity, the house of the Vestal Virgins. Imagine the moon still hanging in a velvet sky, the pre-dawn chill seeping through stone corridors and the soft flicker of a single sacred flame that must never, ever go out. We're going to spend an average Tuesday with one of these remarkable women, exploring the rituals, responsibilities, and the surprisingly complex world of Rome's most revered priestesses. And let's be honest, with a 30-year vow of celibacy, a dress code stricter than a royal wedding, and the tiny, insignificant detail that if you let the sacred fire go out, you could be, well, let's just say severely reprimanded in a very permanent Roman way. You probably wouldn't survive the first week without a major existential crisis and a desperate craving for pizza. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps more than you know. And as always, I'd love to see where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world, so drop a comment below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The darkness in your small cell within the atrium Vesta. The house of the Vestals is thick and comforting. A familiar blanket against the sleeping city outside. It's not the absolute black of a cave, more a deep charcoal gray, softened by the faintest, almost imperceptible glow that might be moonlight filtering through a high, narrow window slit. Or perhaps just the lingering memory of lamplight from the previous evening. You lie still for a moment on your simple pallet, a woven straw mattress that has molded to your form over countless nights. It's not luxurious, certainly not by the standards of the wealthy matrons, whose grand domus houses line the Palatine Hill just a stone's throw away, but it's familiar, and in its own way peaceful. The woolen blanket covering you is coarse, but warm-smelling faintly of lanolin and the herbs used to keep moths at bay. Lavender, perhaps, or rosemary. It's a scent that has become synonymous with safety with the enclosed, protected world you inhabit. A distant sound, the mournful call of a horn from a far-off military barracks, signaling some pre-dawn watch change. Or perhaps the creak of a heavy temple door somewhere in the vast religious complex of the Forum nudges you gently from the depths of sleep. There are no crowing roosters here in the heart of Rome, not this close to the sacred precincts. Only the subtle sounds of a great city stirring in its slumber, and the even more subtle internal clock that governs the lives of Vesta's chosen. It's Tuesday, or as the Romans would call it, Dies Martes, the day of Mars. Though here in Vesta's sanctuary, every day is Vesta's day first and foremost. Mars can have his glory on the battlefields. Here the goddess of the hearth reigns supreme. You don't need a water clock or a servant to wake you for your appointed watch. Years of routine, of dedication, have etched the rhythm of the sacred duties into your very bones. It is your turn, along with one of your sister Vestals, to ensure the ignis perpetuus. The eternal flame of Vesta burns brightly through these last hours of darkness and into the new dawn. The thought of that flame, the living heart of Rome, is the first conscious image that forms in your mind, banishing the last wisps of dreams. It's a heavy responsibility, a sacred trust, one that has been passed down through generations of Vestals for centuries, long before Rome was an empire, back when it was just a collection of huts on muddy hills. No pressure, really. Just the spiritual well-being of an entire civilization resting on your ability to keep a fire from going out. It's like being in charge of the world's most important nightlight. Slowly, deliberately, you push back the woolen blanket. The air in your cell is cool, carrying the damp chill that often settles over Rome in the hours before sunrise, even in the warmer months. Goosebumps rise on your arms. Your sleeping tunic, a simple linen shift, offers little protection against it. You sit up your feet, finding the cold stone floor. For a moment, you remain seated, gathering your thoughts, your composure. The transition from the soft oblivion of sleep to the focused awareness required for your duties must be made with intention, with reverence. This isn't a job you can just roll out of bed and stumble into still half asleep. Well, you could, but it probably wouldn't end well for Rome. Or for you. Your cell is small, sparsely furnished. Besides your pallet, there's a small wooden chest where you keep your few personal belongings. Extra tunics, your distinctive white Vestal headdress, the infula and vitae, perhaps a few cherished items from your childhood before you were chosen between the ages of 6 and 10 to enter this sacred service. A lifetime ago, it sometimes feels. 30 years of service, a significant portion of any life. The first 10 years spent learning the rites, the next 10 performing them, and the final 10 teaching the novices. You are currently, in your performing years, the heart of your sacred duty. Sometimes, in quiet moments, you wonder what life is like for girls your age outside these walls, girls who are now wives and mothers. But such thoughts are fleeting, quickly dismissed. Yours is a different path. A path of immense honor, unique privilege, and profound responsibility. And let's be honest, probably better access to really good seats at the games. Every cloud. You rise your movements measured and quiet. There's no need for haste, only for mindful preparation. You reach for your daily garments laid out neatly the night before. The white linen stola, the long sleeveless tunic that is the hallmark of a Roman matron. Though for you, it symbolizes a different kind of status, a sacred purity. Over this, you will later don the palla, the rectangular shawl that can be draped in various ways, and of course, the distinctive headdress that marks you as a Vestal. The fabric is cool against your skin, a familiar sensation. You dress in the near darkness, your hands knowing the folds and ties by long practice. No fumbling with buttons or zippers here. Roman fashion was all about elegant draping and the occasional strategically placed fibula. Less fuss, more flow. Though trying to keep a toga from unwrapping at an inopportune moment during a solemn procession must have been its own special kind of stress. Once dressed in your basic underlayers, you pour a little water from a small clay ewer into a matching basin. The water is cold, shocking your skin awake more effectively than any alarm. You wash your face and hands, a simple act of purification before you approach the even more sacred duties that await. There are no mirrors here, no vanities. Your appearance is secondary to your purpose, though a certain neatness and decorum are expected befitting your role. Your hair, which must be worn in a specific ancient style, the sine crines 6 plaits, is likely already bound up from the previous day, or perhaps covered by a simple nightcap that you now remove. Later, before any public appearance, it will be meticulously arranged and covered by the formal headdress. For now, practicality and readiness are key. You can't be worrying about a stray lock of hair when you're dealing with the spiritual equivalent of a nuclear reactor. You open the heavy wooden door of your cell, its hinges groaning softly in the pre-dawn stillness. The sound seems loud in the otherwise silent corridor of the atrium vestae. This vast colonnaded courtyard, surrounded by the living quarters of the 6 vestals, the kitchens, the storerooms, and the offices of the Pontifex Maximus, who, though male is the head of your religious college, is a world unto itself, a sanctuary nestled right beside the bustling Roman Forum. At this hour it is steeped in shadow, the columns rising like pale ghosts around the central rectangular impluvium, now dark and still. The air here smells of damp stone of the herbs grown in the small courtyard garden, rosemary, bay, laurel, thyme, and always faintly of wood smoke and incense from the nearby Temple of Vesta. It's a complex, ancient perfume, the very scent of sanctity. You make your way along the covered walkway, your soft leather sandals making almost no sound on the mosaic floor. Some of these mosaics depict scenes from Roman history or mythology. Others are intricate geometric patterns. Even in the dim light, you know their textures, their undulations beneath your feet. You pass the closed doors of your sister Vestals. Some will be sleeping their duties done or yet to come. Others, the older ones, might be stirring, preparing for their own tasks of teaching or administration. The life of a Vestal is highly structured, each with her role, her responsibilities, all revolving around the central, unwavering duty to Vesta. It's like a very exclusive, very old sorority, but with much higher stakes and a distinct lack of toga parties. As you approach the eastern end of the atrium, the end closest to the small round temple of Vesta, you see a faint, warm glow spilling from its open doorway. That is your destination. That is the heart of Rome. Your sister Vestal for this watch, let's call her Flavia, is already there. Or perhaps you are the first to arrive by a few moments. You see her silhouette, a figure in white moving quietly within the temple. A sense of calm, of purpose settles over you. This is where you belong. This is what you were chosen for. The Temple of Vesta. The 80s. Vestae is not a grand, imposing structure like the Temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, or the sprawling marble magnificence of the Temple of Venus and Roma that Emperor Hadrian built. It is small, circular, almost modest in comparison, its design harking back to the earliest round huts of the first Roman settlers. Its circular form is symbolic, representing the primitive hearth, the center of the home, and by extension the center of the Roman state. It has no towering statues of gods on its roof, no ostentatious displays of wealth. Its sanctity lies not in its size, but in what it contains, the sacred flame, and certain other deeply secret object, the Pignora Imperii talismans, or pledges of Rome's continued existence and dominion, said to have been rescued from Troy by Aeneas himself. What these objects are precisely is a secret known only to the Vestals, and perhaps the Pontifex Maximus. Speculation has been rife for centuries. The Palladium, a statue of Pallas Athena, a meteorite sacred shields. But the truth remains veiled in mystery. Even you, as a Vestal, might only know of some of them or their location at a certain stage of your service. Secrets within secrets. Rome loved a good secret, especially if it was tied to its own awesomeness. You pause at the threshold of the temple, a moment of silent reverence before entering. The air flowing out is warmer, carrying the dry, clean scent of burning wood, specifically oak, the traditional fuel for Vesta's flame, or perhaps another ritually pure hardwood. It's a comforting, familiar smell, one that has permeated your life for years. Inside the temple is circular, the roof supported by columns. In the center, on a raised hearth, burns the sacred flame. It is not a roaring bonfire, but a steady, controlled fire, its flames reaching upwards, a tongue of light in the dimness. Its flickering light casts dancing shadows on the curved walls, illuminating the simple sacred implements stored nearby. Tongs, small shovels, and vessels for water and oil, all kept meticulously clean and ready for use. Historians still argue whether the earliest form of Vesta's worship involved an actual anthropomorphic statue of the goddess within her temple, or if the sacred flame itself was considered her sole aniconic presence. In later periods, statues of Vesta certainly existed elsewhere, but within her most sacred temple, the emphasis was always overwhelmingly on the Ignis, the fire. For you, the flame is Vesta. It is her living spirit, her watchful presence, the guarantor of Rome's safety and prosperity. To let it die is unthinkable, a sign of divine displeasure, a portent of disaster for the city, and for the Vestal responsible. The punishment was severe scourging by the Pontifex Maximus in the dark, a deeply shaming and painful ordeal. So, yes, keeping that fire going is priority number 1, 2, and 3. Forget to file your taxes, maybe you get a fine. Forget to feed the sacred fire, and it's a whole different level of trouble. Flavia turns as you enter, a silent nod of acknowledgement passing between you. She is perhaps a few years older, her movements practiced and serene. There is little need for words. Your duties are well understood, shared seamlessly. One of you will attend to the flame, while the other might perform other small tasks, ensuring the temple is clean, that the sacred water vessels are full, or preparing for the later, more formal rituals of the day. Your first task is always the flame. You approach the hearth, your gaze fixed on the fire. It is burning well, a healthy, steady blaze clearly tended with care by the Vestals on the previous watch. But even a healthy fire needs constant attention. It consumes its fuel. It produces ash it can falter if neglected. Your role is not just to keep it burning, but to keep it burning purely. This means carefully removing any accumulated ash, adding fresh, ritually pure wood, and ensuring the flame remains bright and clean. You take up a small bronze shovel and a pair of tongs, their metal cool in your hand. With practiced movements, you gently clear away the ash from around the base of the fire, careful not to disturb the burning logs too much. The ash is collected into a designated vessel. It too is sacred, and will be disposed of later with proper ritual, likely carried to a specific spot outside the Porta Stercoraria, a gate whose name charmingly relates to dung or refuse, but in this context it's about the ritually pure disposal of sacred waste. Even Vesta's garbage collection has to be done just right. Then you select new pieces of wood from a nearby store. This is not just any firewood. It must be from a specific type of tree, usually oak, known for its slow, steady burn. It must be sound dry and free from blemish. It might even have been consecrated in some way before being brought into the temple. You add the logs to the fire carefully, one by one, ensuring they are placed to catch the flame and burn efficiently without producing too much smoke. Too much smoke would be a bad sign and impurity. Everything about Vesta's worship is about purity, cleanliness, and order. She is the goddess of the hearth, the stable center of the home, and the state, and her service reflects that. As you work, you might murmur ancient prayers formulas passed down through generations of Vestal's words, whose exact meanings might even be partly lost to time, but whose power resides in their correct, reverent recitation. Or perhaps your prayer is silent, a focused meditation on the goddess, on the well-being of Rome, on the sacred duty you perform. The flickering light plays on your face, your white robes taking on a warm golden hue. The only sounds are the crackle of the fire, the soft scrape of your tools, your own quiet breathing, and perhaps the equally quiet movements of Flavia as she goes about her tasks. It is a moment of profound connection. You are not just a servant. You are a conduit, a link between the divine and the mortal, ensuring the flow of Vesta's protective power to the city. The responsibility is immense, but there is also a deep sense of peace of rightness in performing this ancient ritual. You are part of an unbroken chain stretching back to the very foundation of Rome. You are a guardian of its soul. It's a lot more meaningful than, say, being in charge of making sure the office coffee machine doesn't run out of beans. Though some might argue that's also crucial for societal function. A mainstream historical fact that underscores the unique position of the Vestals is their independence and legal status. Unlike most Roman women who were under the legal authority of their father Patria Potestas or husband Manus Vestals, were legally autonomous once consecrated. They could own property, make a will, and give evidence in court without the need for a male guardian. This was an extraordinary level of freedom and authority for women in ancient Rome, reflecting the immense respect and importance accorded to their sacred office. They were in many ways a third gender in Roman society. Not quite male, not quite typical female, but something set apart, sacred, and powerful. You continue to tend the flame, ensuring it is well established, burning brightly and cleanly. You might adjust a log with the tongs or gently fan the embers to encourage a stronger blaze if needed. Every movement is precise, born of long practice and a deep understanding of the fire's needs. There is an art to it, a science almost knowing just how much fuel to add, just how to arrange the logs for optimal burning. You are in essence a highly specialized, divinely ordained fire warden. As the first faint hints of dawn begin to lighten the sky outside, visible, perhaps, as a subtle shift in the quality of light filtering into the temple, you feel a sense of completion for this part of your watch. The flame is secure, burning strong to greet the new day. The heart of Rome is safe. You and Flavia might exchange a quiet glance, a shared understanding of a duty fulfilled. One quirky, or rather privileged aspect of being a Vestal was their right to be preceded by a lictor when traveling in public. Lictors were official attendants who carried the fasces a bundle of rods, sometimes with an axe, symbolizing magisterial authority. Only the highest Roman magistrates were granted lictors. For the Vestals to have this honor demonstrated their elevated public status and the sacrosanct nature of their person. If you, as a Vestal, were walking down the street and encountered a condemned criminal being led to execution, your mere accidental presence had the power to pardon him, provided the encounter was truly fortuitous and not arranged. That's some serious get-out-of-jail-free power, literally. Imagine the poor fellow trudging to his doom and then, "Oh, look, it's a Vestal guess. It's my lucky Tuesday." though one imagines the lictors probably tried to reroute condemned criminals if they knew a Vestal was out and about just to avoid the paperwork. The air in the temple now begins to feel less like the deep stillness of night and more like the quiet anticipation of morning. Soon, other members of the household will begin to stir. The daily life of the atrium vesti, with its many rituals, its administrative tasks, its teaching and learning, will resume. But for these few precious hours before dawn, you and Flavia have been the sole guardians of Rome's most sacred fire, continuing a tradition that stretches back into the mists of legend. It's a profound, if often unseen, service. Your Tuesday has begun not with the hustle of a typical Roman morning, but with the quiet, focused intensity of a sacred watch, ensuring that the light of Vesta, and by extension the light of Rome, continues to burn brightly against the encroaching darkness. You step back from the hearth, your immediate duty done, a sense of weary satisfaction settling over you. The flame dances a tiny, eternal sun in its own small temple, and for now, all is well. The sacred flame, now burning with a steady, confident light, casts a warm glow within the small, circular temple of Vesta, pushing back the last vestiges of pre-dawn gloom. You and Flavia have ensured its passage through the night, and as the city outside slowly awakens, your duties shift from the solitary vigil to the more structured rituals of the Vestal morning. The air still holds the cool promise of dawn, but the sounds from beyond the atrium walls are beginning to change. The distant rumble of iron-shod cartwheels on stone paving allowed only outside the city's core during daylight hours. But perhaps early delivery wagons on the periphery, the first calls of street vendors, the general hum of a metropolis stirring to life. But within these sacred precincts, a different rhythm prevails, one governed by ancient tradition and meticulous observance. Before any other major tasks can be undertaken, further personal and ritual purification is necessary. While your initial ablutions in your cell were a basic preparation, the duties of the day demand a more formal cleansing. You and Flavia and any other Vestals whose duties require them to enter the temple or handle sacred objects would proceed to a designated area within the atrium vesti, perhaps a specific fountain or basin for this purpose. The water used would itself be ritually pure, drawn from a sacred spring. Most famously, the spring of Juturna in the Forum, or perhaps from rainwater collected in a special cistern within the atrium, uncontaminated by contact with the earth through lead pipes which were thought to pollute. The Romans were very particular about their water, especially for religious purposes. You wouldn't just turn on a tap. Fetching sacred water was a ritual in itself, often involving specific vessels and prayers. You would wash your hands and face again more thoroughly. This time, perhaps reciting specific invocations to Vesta. Cleansing yourself not just of physical dirt, but of any lingering miasma from the profane world or the unformed state of sleep. Purity is paramount. Vesta is a goddess of absolute purity, and her priestesses must reflect that in every aspect of their being and their actions. It's not just about being a virgin in the physical sense. It's about maintaining a state of ritual cleanliness, a spiritual spotlessness that allows you to mediate between the human and divine. It's like a spiritual deep clean, getting ready to interact with the sacred without accidentally tracking in any metaphysical mud. Once purified, your attention turns to one of the primary daily tasks that falls to the Vestals: the preparation of mola salsa. This literally means salted flour or sacred grain, and it was an essential ingredient in many Roman religious ceremonies, particularly sacrifices. It was made from coarse-ground emmer wheat farro, an ancient grain that was a staple in early Rome, mixed with salt. The Vestals held the exclusive responsibility for preparing and storing this sacred substance. It wasn't just any old flour. It was a key component in establishing the correct ritual conditions for communication with the gods. Sprinkling mola salsa on the head of a sacrificial animal before it was dispatched or on the altar was a way of consecrating it, making it acceptable to the deities. So, basically, the Vestals were in charge of making the divine party snacks the holy appetizers that got the gods in a receptive mood. The process of making mola salsa would be carried out with meticulous care and adherence to ancient tradition. The emmer wheat used would have to be of the highest quality, ritually pure. It might be ground by hand in a special stone quern reserved for this purpose within the atrium vesti. The salt, too, would be pure, perhaps sourced from a specific location. You and your sister Vestals would work together, grinding the grain carefully, measuring and mixing the ingredients according to a precise and unvarying recipe that had been passed down for generations. There would likely be specific chants or prayers recited during its preparation. Imbuing the mola salsa not just with physical ingredients, but with spiritual potency. It's like a sacred baking session, where every ingredient, every action is freighted with religious significance. No casually licking the spoon here. Imagine the scene. Several Vestals, their white robes pristine, their movements deliberate, gathered in a designated workspace, perhaps a cool, stone-flagged room within the atrixum. The rhythmic grating of the quern stones, the soft whisper of flour being sieved or measured the murmur of ancient formulas. The air would be filled with the dry, earthy scent of ground wheat and the faint, sharp tang of salt. This was not a quick or easy task. Producing enough mola salsa for the many state sacrifices and temple rites of Rome would require regular, diligent effort. It was a fundamental, if often unsung, part of the religious infrastructure of the city. Without the Vestals' mola salsa, a significant portion of Roman religious life would grind to a halt, quite literally. It was one of their key contributions to the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, the state of harmony between Rome and its divine protectors, that was maintained through correct religious observance. While some Vestals are engaged in preparing the mola salsa, others would be attending to the Temple of Vesta itself and its sacred contents. The temple, though small, required constant upkeep to maintain its state of absolute purity. The floors would be swept not with just any broom, but perhaps with a special broom made of specific materials, or one that was ritually consecrated. Any dust or debris was an impurity that could offend the goddess. The sacred implements, the tongs, shovels, lamps, and vessels used in the temple, would be cleaned and polished until they gleamed. There was no room for sloppiness in Vesta's house. It was the ultimate example of cleanliness is next to godliness taken to an extreme. If Vesta were to pop in for an unexpected inspection, you'd want everything to be absolutely spotless. She probably wasn't the kind of goddess who would overlook a dusty corner. One of the more enigmatic duties of the Vestals was the safeguarding of certain sacred objects, the Pignora Imperii, or Sacra Arcana, which were stored within the innermost, most secret part of the Temple of Vesta, the Pinus Vestae. As mentioned, the exact nature of these objects was a closely guarded secret believed to be talismans, upon which the safety and destiny of Rome depended. These might have included the Palladium, a statue of Pallas Athena said to have been brought from Troy by Aeneas. Perhaps sacred shields and cilia connected to Mars or other ancient relics whose origins were lost in the mists of time. Access to the Penis Vestae was restricted to the Vestals and the Pontifex Maximus. No one else was permitted to enter or even to know its exact contents. Part of your duty as a Vestal would be to ensure the security and sanctity of this inner sanctum. This might involve specific rituals performed at its threshold, or simply the constant watchful presence that ensured that no unauthorized person ever approached. The level of secrecy surrounding these objects was immense. It's like being in charge of the nation's most important secret recipe, but instead of a recipe for fried chicken, it's a recipe for imperial destiny, and if it gets out or gets damaged, everything goes pear-shaped. The Vestals were also responsible for tending to any other sacred elements within the temple or the atrium. This might include caring for a sacred laurel tree if one grew within the precinct, as laurel was associated with purity, victory, and prophecy. They might also be responsible for preparing specific offerings for Vesta beyond the mola salsa. Perhaps special cakes or libations, though Vesta's worship was generally characterized by its simplicity and focus on the fire, rather than elaborate blood sacrifices within her temple itself. Blood sacrifice typically took place outside at an altar. During these morning hours, the older Vestals, those in their final decade of service, the teaching years, would be instructing the novices, the young girls who had recently been chosen to join the sisterhood. This instruction would cover all aspects of Vestal life. The complex rituals, the ancient prayers and formulas, many of which were in archaic Latin requiring careful memorization and understanding the preparation of mola salsa, the tending of the flame, the history and traditions of the college, and the strict rules of conduct that governed their lives. It was an intensive education shaping these young girls into future guardians of Rome's Sacred Heart. Imagine being a 10-year-old trying to learn incredibly complex rituals and archaic prayers, knowing that a mistake could have dire consequences. It's a bit more pressure than your average Tuesday morning Latin class. The senior Vestals were the living repositories of this ancient knowledge, ensuring its faithful transmission from one generation to the next. Their role as teachers was crucial for the continuity of the cult. A mainstream historical fact is that the selection process for new Vestals was carried out by the Pontifex Maximus. When a vacancy arose due to the death of a Vestal, or the completion of her 30-year term if she chose to leave, the Pontifex Maximus would select a young girl typically between the ages of 6 and 10 from a patrician family. The girl had to be free from physical blemishes and have both parents living. The selection ritual involved the Pontifex Maximus taking the girl by the hand and uttering the ancient formula, Amata te capio beloved. I take you thus, formally consecrating her to Vesta. This moment marked her separation from her family and her entry into a new life of sacred service. It must have been a daunting experience for such a young child suddenly removed from her home and thrust into this highly structured, deeply religious world. The daily routine within the Atrium Vesti would have been punctuated by these various tasks performed with a quiet diligence. There wasn't a lot of idle chatter or frivolous activity. The atmosphere was one of focused sanctity of purposeful movement. Even mundane tasks like fetching water or sweeping floors were imbued with religious significance when performed in Vesta's service. The Vestals lived a communal life, sharing their duties, their meals, and their living space. While each had her own small cell for sleeping, much of their day would be spent in the company of their sisters, working together to maintain the cult and its traditions. It was a unique sorority bound by sacred vows and shared responsibilities. One can imagine a strong sense of camaraderie and mutual support developing among them, given the unique pressures and privileges of their position. They were in a very real sense a family, albeit one chosen by the gods rather than by blood alone. One quirky or fringe tidbit is the association of the Vestals with donkeys. The donkey was considered sacred to Vesta, or at least connected to her cult. On the festival of Vestalia in June, donkeys were adorned with garlands of flowers and loaves of bread, and given a day of rest. The reason for this association is not entirely clear. One story told by Ovid suggests that a donkey's bray once saved Vesta from an unwelcome advance by the god Priapus by waking her up. Another theory connects the donkey to the grinding of grain for mola salsa, as donkeys were commonly used to turn millstones. Whatever the origin, it's a rather charming image, the most revered priestesses in Rome having a special fondness for and a festival honoring the humble donkey. Perhaps they even kept a few well-tended donkeys within the atrium grounds as sacred mascots. Fluffy, the sacred donkey, has had his violets for the day right. As the morning progresses, the sounds of the city outside the atrium walls would grow louder, more insistent. The cries of merchants in the forum, the tramp of soldiers' boots, the murmur of crowds. But within the house of the Vestals, a sense of peace, of ordered sanctity would prevail. The focus remained on the internal duties, the meticulous preparations, the quiet hum of sacred routine. The Vestals were in the heart of Rome, yet set apart from it, a still point in a turning world. Their white robes, moving through the colonnades and courtyards, would be a constant visual reminder of the purity and devotion that underpinned the spiritual life of the city. The preparation of mola salsa might be completed, the sacred grain carefully stored in special earthenware jars. The temple would be pristine, its flame burning brightly. The novices would be deep in their lessons, memorizing ancient hymns, or practicing the intricate gestures of a ritual. The senior Vestals might be engaged in administrative tasks, perhaps managing the considerable properties and endowments that belonged to the College of Vestals, as they were quite wealthy and influential landowners in their own right. Or they might be consulting with the Pontifex Maximus on matters of religious law or upcoming ceremonies. It was a complex, self-contained world, a microcosm of Roman religious life functioning with well-oiled precision. The specific duties for any given Tuesday would also depend on the religious calendar. Rome had a packed schedule of festivals, sacrifices, and holy days. If it were a day sacred to a particular deity, or if a special state sacrifice was planned, the Vestal's role might be more prominent, requiring them to prepare larger quantities of mola salsa, or even to participate in public processions or ceremonies outside their own precinct, though always with appropriate escort and reverence. Their presence was often required at major state events, lending an aura of sanctity and divine approval. So, an average Tuesday could vary quite a bit depending on what was happening in the broader religious life of the city. It was never just about keeping one fire going. It was about supporting the entire religious ecosystem of Rome. The rituals performed by the Vestals were not just for show. They were believed to be essential for the salus publica, the public welfare. Their constant vigilance, their meticulous adherence to ancient traditions, their unwavering purity. All these were seen as vital contributions to maintaining the favor of the gods and ensuring Rome's continued success and prosperity. It was a heavy burden of responsibility, but also a source of immense pride and status. To be a Vestal virgin was to be one of the most honored and respected women in Rome, a living symbol of the city's piety and its connection to the divine. And as the morning hours tick by, filled with these quiet, essential tasks, you, as a Vestal, are playing your part in this grand, ancient drama, your every action contributing to the sacred rhythm that sustains the heart of an empire. The sun climbs higher in the Roman sky, its warmth beginning to penetrate even the cool, shaded colonnades of the Atrium Vestae. The intense, focused activities of the early morning, the tending of the sacred flame, the preparation of molla salsa, the meticulous cleaning of the temple, gradually give way to duties that might involve interaction with the world beyond these hallowed walls, or at least a shift in focus within them. The rhythmic hum of the atrium continues, but its melody changes as midday approaches. This is a time when the Vestal's public face might be more visible, and their unique privileges and responsibilities come to the fore, contrasting with the disciplined, almost monastic life lived within their sacred enclosure. If it is a day of significant state ritual, a major sacrifice in the forum, or a festival requiring their presence, you and your sister Vestals might now be preparing for a public appearance. This would involve a more elaborate process of dressing. Your simple daily stola and palla would be arranged with particular care. Most importantly, you would don the full formal headdress that unequivocally identified you as a Vestal virgin. This consisted of the infola, a band of white and red woolen cloth wrapped around the head, and the vitae, fillets, or ribbons that hung down from it. Over this, a white, hood-like sacrificial veil, the suffibulum, would be worn fastened beneath the chin with a fibula, a type of brooch. This distinctive attire was a powerful symbol of your sacred status, your purity, and your dedication to Vesta. It set you apart, instantly recognizable, and commanding respect wherever you went. Getting this headdress on just right was probably an art form in itself, requiring assistance much like getting into a very complicated wedding dress. You wouldn't want your infula slipping during a solemn procession. That would be terribly un-Vestal. Before leaving the atrium for any public duty, there would likely be further prayers and rituals ensuring you carried the sanctity of Vesta with you, and were protected from any profane influences of the outside world. When Vestals appeared in public, they were usually escorted by a lictor, a privilege we touched on earlier. This lictor, carrying the fesses, would clear a path for you through the often crowded streets of Rome, a visible sign of your elevated status, and the state's protection over your sacred person. Imagine walking through the bustling forum, a sea of people parting before you, your white robes a stark contrast to the colorful, often chaotic attire of the general populace. It must have been a striking sight, a reminder to all Romans of the divine presence that watched over their city. Your very presence could halt legal proceedings, or, as mentioned, pardon a condemned criminal if your encounter was accidental. This power, the ius arbitritri, was a potent symbol of your sacrosanct status. You weren't just a priestess. You were a walking, talking embodiment of Rome's conscience with the occasional power to override its justice system. Oops, accidentally pardoned another murderer on my way to the bakery. My bad. One of the significant public duties of the Vestals was their participation in major state sacrifices. While they did not perform the act of slaughter themselves, that was typically done by male priests or cult attendants. Their presence was often required. They would supply the mola salsa, which was sprinkled on the animal and the altar. They might also offer prayers or perform specific ritual actions at key moments in the ceremony. Their involvement lent an essential aura of purity and divine sanction to these important state rites, ensuring that the gods were properly appeased and that the Pax Deorum was maintained. These sacrifices were not just religious events, they were also important civic and political occasions, reinforcing social order and the authority of the state. The Vestals, by their participation, helped to weave together the religious, social, and political fabric of Rome. Another crucial, though perhaps less public responsibility of the Vestals was the safeguarding of important documents. The Temple of Vesta, due to its sanctity and the unimpeachable character of its priestesses, became a trusted repository for wills, treaties, and other significant state and private documents. Wealthy Romans, and even emperors, would entrust their last testaments to the care of the Vestals, confident that they would be kept safe and secure, free from tampering or political interference. This was a remarkable testament to the trust placed in these women. They were, in essence, the nation's most secure safety deposit box, guarded by divine sanction rather than iron bars. Imagine the secrets contained within those scrolls, the political machinations, the family fortunes, all resting quietly in the care of Vesta's priestesses. You, as a Vestal, might be responsible for receiving these documents, cataloging them, and ensuring their proper storage within a secure archive in the atrium or the temple. It was a duty that required discretion, meticulous record-keeping, and an understanding of the weight of responsibility you carried. You're not just filing paperwork, you're curating the legal and historical memory of Rome's elite. No pressure to avoid coffee spills on Caesar's will. Historians still argue about the extent to which Vestals were involved in or privy to the political content of the documents they guarded. Were they merely passive custodians, or did their unique position give them a degree of informal influence or knowledge about the affairs of state and the plans of powerful individuals? Given their intelligence, their long tenure, and their interactions with the highest levels of Roman society, including the Pontifex Maximus, who was often a major political figure, it's plausible that they were among the best-informed individuals in Rome, even if they were formally excluded from direct political participation. They would have seen wills being deposited, perhaps sensing the shifting tides of power and alliance. Their silence and discretion would have been paramount. Back within the atrium, Vesti midday might also be the time for a communal meal. The Vestals lived together, and their meals would likely have been taken in a refectory or dining area within their house. The food would be simple but wholesome, befitting their sacred status. Luxury and extravagance were not part of the Vestal lifestyle. The diet would likely consist of grains, like the emmer wheat they used for mola salsa, perhaps made into bread or porridge vegetables, fruits, legumes, and perhaps some cheese or fish. Meat consumption might have been limited or restricted, especially certain types of meat, in keeping with purity rules, though this is an area where details are scarce. The meal would be an opportunity for the sisterhood to gather, perhaps to discuss the day's events, or for the senior Vestals to offer guidance or instruction to the younger ones. It would be a quiet, ordered affair, a moment of communal sustenance before the duties of the afternoon. One imagines the conversation wasn't exactly racy. Did you hear Flavia used a new technique for polishing the sacred tongs today? Caused quite a stir. A mainstream historical fact relating to their diet and provisions is that the Vestals received a state-funded allowance the Annona to provide for their upkeep. This, along with income from the extensive properties owned by their college, ensured they were well provided for and could maintain their household and perform their duties without financial worry. This financial independence was another aspect of their unique status. They weren't dependent on individual families or patrons. They were supported by the Roman state itself, underscoring their importance to the city as a whole. After the midday meal, the rhythm of the day might slow a little. The intense heat of a Roman summer afternoon often encouraged a period of quiet activity or rest. For the Vestals, this might mean engaging in tasks that required less physical exertion, but still contributed to the life of the sanctuary. Weaving was a traditional and highly valued skill for Roman women, and the Vestals were no exception. They would likely have looms within the atrium where they wove fabrics for their own garments, for temple hangings, or for other sacred purposes. The act of weaving itself was often imbued with symbolic meaning, the interlacing of threads mirroring the weaving of fate or the interconnectedness of the community. The fabrics they produced would need to be of the highest quality, often pure white linen or wool reflecting their commitment to purity. Imagine the quiet click-clack of looms, the soft murmur of voices, as Vestals worked together, their hands skilled and practiced, creating textiles that were both functional and sacred. It's a far cry from fast fashion. This was slow, mindful creation, every thread imbued with intention. This period might also be a time for study. The rituals and traditions of Vesta's cult were complex and ancient. The Vestals needed to have a deep understanding of the prayers, the hymns, the history of their order, and the significance of the various festivals and ceremonies they participated in. The senior Vestals would continue to instruct the novices, but even experienced Vestals might spend time studying texts, perhaps ancient scrolls kept within the atrium's library, if such a formal library existed, or perhaps a collection of sacred texts. They needed to be scholars, as well as priestesses, preservers of ancient knowledge. Their education was not focused on rhetoric or philosophy in the way a young Roman nobleman's might be, but on the sacred lore and liturgical practices essential to their duties. It was a highly specialized form of scholarship, vital for the continuity of Rome's religious traditions. The atrium Vestae itself was a surprisingly spacious and well-appointed complex. Archaeological excavations have revealed a large rectangular courtyard, surrounded by a two-story colonnaded building, with numerous rooms including living quarters, kitchens, bathrooms with running water, a Roman specialty, and audience halls. There were statues of famous Vestals who had served with distinction, their honorific inscriptions celebrating their piety and service. It was a comfortable, if austere, environment, designed to support the unique lifestyle of its inhabitants. It wasn't a prison, but a self-contained world, a sanctuary of peace and order in the midst of a vibrant, often chaotic city. One quirky, or perhaps just practical feature of the atrium was its sophisticated drainage system essential for maintaining cleanliness and dealing with the water used in numerous purification rituals. The Romans were master engineers, and even their sacred spaces benefited from this practical genius. You wouldn't want a plumbing backup during a major festival. That would be a very bad omen. If there were no pressing public duties, a Tuesday afternoon might find you engaged in these quieter pursuits. Perhaps you are mending a sacred vestment, its fabric worn thin from years of use. Or maybe you are carefully transcribing an ancient hymn onto a new papyrus roll, ensuring its preservation for future generations of Vestals. Or perhaps you are simply sitting in the shade of the colonnade, looking out at the central garden where herbs and flowers grow a moment of quiet contemplation amidst your structured day. The life of a Vestal was demanding, but it was not without its moments of peace and reflection. The very rhythm of the rituals, the familiarity of the tasks, could be a source of deep spiritual satisfaction. The unique legal status of the Vestals also meant they could be called upon to witness important legal transactions, particularly those involving women, as their testimony was considered unimpeachable. So, on any given Tuesday, a Vestal might be summoned to a magistrate's court or a private home to act as a formal witness to a will, a marriage contract, or a property transfer. This was another aspect of their public role, their integrity lending weight and solemnity to these legal acts. It's like being a notary public, but with a divine seal of approval and much better outfits. The interactions between the Vestals and the Pontifex Maximus would also be part of their life. The Pontifex Maximus was the head of the state religion and held ultimate authority over the College of Vestals. He would visit the atrium consult with the Vestals, particularly the Virgo Vestalis Maxima. The chief Vestal oversaw important rituals, and, as mentioned, was responsible for disciplining any Vestal who seriously transgressed the sacred laws, most notably the vow of chastity, or allowing the sacred flame to be extinguished. The relationship would have been one of respectful deference on the part of the Vestals, but also, given their own sacred status and knowledge, one of considerable influence. The Pontifex Maximus relied on their expertise in matters relating to Vesta's cult. As the afternoon wears on, the shadows begin to lengthen in the courtyard. The heat of the day starts to subside. There's a sense of the day's main work being done, a transition towards the quieter duties of the evening. The mola salsa is prepared. The temple is immaculate, any public duties have been fulfilled. The Vestals might gather again, perhaps for another simple meal, or to share news or discuss preparations for upcoming festivals. The sense of community, of shared purpose, would be strong. They were a small, elite group of women, set apart by their sacred calling, their lives interwoven by decades of shared service. They understood each other in a way no one outside their order could. The average Tuesday for a Vestal was therefore a blend of profound spiritual responsibility, meticulous ritual observance, unique legal privileges, and a structured communal life. It was a life demanding immense discipline, purity, and dedication, but also offering unparalleled honor and a central role in the spiritual well-being of Rome. It was a life lived in the public eye, yet deeply private. A life of ancient tradition, yet responding to the daily needs of a living city. And, as the sun begins to dip towards the western hills, casting long shadows across the Forum, and into the peaceful enclave of the Atrium Vesti, you, as a Vestal, can look back on a day spent in service to your goddess and your city. A day where your hands have touched the sacred, and your vigilance has kept the heart of Rome beating strong. The long shadows of the late afternoon stretch across the mosaic floors of the Atrium Vesti, and a softer, more golden light bathes the colonnades. The intense heat of midday has mellowed into a comfortable warmth, and a gentle breeze might stir the leaves of the herbs in the central garden, releasing their fragrant scents. Rosemary, thyme, and perhaps the sharp, clean aroma of bay laurel. The sounds from the bustling forum outside begin to quieten as businesses close and people start to head home. Within the house of the Vestals, a similar shift occurs. The more public or labor-intensive duties of the day are largely complete. The mola salsa has been prepared and stored, the temple meticulously cleaned, any state ceremonies attended. Now, as dusk approaches, the rhythm of life within these sacred walls becomes more introspective, focused on personal pursuits within the communal framework, on study, on artistic creation, and on the quiet contemplation that prepares one for the night ahead. You might find yourself returning to your small cell for a period, perhaps to rest for a short while, or to engage in private prayer or meditation. The 30 years of service are long, and the demands, both physical and spiritual, are considerable. Moments of quiet solitude would be precious a time to recharge, to reflect on the day's events, or to simply be still in the presence of Vesta. Your cell, though sparse, is your personal sanctuary within the larger sanctuary of the atrium. It's a space where you are not Vestal, the public figure, or Vestal, the ritual functionary, but simply you in communion with your goddess. It's like having your own tiny spiritual retreat pod conveniently located at work. Alternatively, this time of day might be dedicated to further study or the teaching of the younger Vestals. The senior Vestals, those in their third decade of service, would gather the novices perhaps in a quiet classroom-like space within the atrium, or in a shaded part of the courtyard. Lessons would continue focusing on the vast body of knowledge required to be a proficient Vestal. This might involve reciting complex hymns and prayers in archaic Latin, understanding the intricate details of the religious calendar with its myriad festivals and observances, or learning the specific genealogies and histories connected to Vesta's cult and the founding of Rome. The oral tradition was strong. Much of this knowledge was passed down through spoken word, through repetition, through embodied practice. The older Vestals were the living libraries, their minds filled with centuries of accumulated wisdom. Imagine trying to memorize all the verses of all the sacred songs, some of which might have been hundreds of years old, with language that was already ancient to your ears. It would require incredible dedication and a prodigious memory. No relying on Google for a quick lyric check here. For those Vestals not engaged in teaching, or for those who had completed their lessons, this period might be devoted to weaving. As we touched on, weaving was a highly respected skill for Roman women, and the Vestals were no exception. They would have looms perhaps set up in a dedicated weaving room or a sheltered part of the colonnade. The rhythmic click-clack of the loom, the soft thud of the beater compacting the weft threads would be a familiar and soothing sound in the late afternoon. They would weave the pure white linen and woolen fabrics needed for their own distinctive garments. The stolae, the pallae, the sophibula. They might also weave textiles for use in the Temple of Vesta, such as altar cloths or hangings, or perhaps special banners or ribbons used in religious processions. The act of weaving itself, transforming raw fleece or flax into ordered, beautiful fabric, was symbolic of creation, of bringing order out of chaos. A fitting activity for the priestesses of Vesta, the goddess of the ordered hearth. The patterns they wove might be simple, emphasizing purity, or they could incorporate subtle symbolic motifs, perhaps using different textures or weaving techniques. It was a practical skill, but also a meditative and creative one. You could say they were the original slow-fashion advocates crafting their own sacred garments with intention and skill. A mainstream historical fact is that the traditional Roman bridal dress, the tunica recta, was said to be woven on an upright loom. The tellar erecta, a type of loom that was also traditionally used by the Vestals. This connection subtly links the purity of the Vestals with the ideal purity of a Roman bride. The Vestals, in their perpetual state of sacred virginity, embodied an idealized form of Roman womanhood, a standard against which other women, particularly brides entering into legitimate marriage, were implicitly measured. Their weaving there was not just about producing cloth. It was about participating in a deeply symbolic tradition connected to Roman ideals of femininity, purity, and domestic order. As dusk deepens, and the first stars begin to prick the darkening sky, lamps would be lit throughout the atrium vesti. These would be simple oil lamps made of clay or bronze filled with olive oil, their small flames casting a warm, flickering light that danced on the walls and columns, creating an atmosphere of serene sanctity. The air would grow cooler, and the sounds of the city outside would become more muted, replaced by the chirping of crickets from the garden or the distant hoot of an owl. This evening period might also be a time for quieter forms of recreation, or personal enrichment within the bounds of Vestal decorum, of course. While their lives were highly structured and devoted to religious duty, they were still intelligent, educated women. They might engage in quiet conversation with their sister Vestals, sharing stories, discussing religious texts, or simply enjoying a moment of companionship. Perhaps there was a small library of scrolls within the atrium, containing not just sacred texts, but also works of poetry or history, which they could read and study. It's unlikely they were reading the racy love elegies of Ovid, though Ovid himself wrote about the Vestalia festival, but more sober, edifying works would probably have been acceptable. The ability to read and write was a sign of education and status, and the Vestals, drawn from patrician families and dedicated to a life that involved the study of ancient texts, would certainly have been literate. One quirky or fringe tidbit concerns the potential for Vestals to act as informal advisors or confidants to other high-status Roman women. Given their reputation for wisdom, purity, and discretion, and their long tenure, meaning they would see generations of Roman families rise and fall. It's plausible that prominent matrons might have sought their counsel on personal or family matters, or perhaps even on religious questions. The atrium vestae, while a sacred enclosure, was not entirely cut off from the world. Visitors were received, particularly those with official business or those seeking to deposit wills. These interactions could have provided opportunities for such informal consultations. Imagine a wealthy noblewoman troubled by a family dispute or a disturbing dream, seeking a quiet word with a senior Vestal, hoping for some wise, divinely inspired advice. The Vestals would have been like the ultimate agony aunts of ancient Rome, but with a direct line to the gods and much stricter confidentiality agreements. The evening meal would likely be another simple communal affair, perhaps similar to the midday meal. It would be taken in an atmosphere of quiet decorum, a time for shared sustenance and reflection on the day's service. After the meal, there might be further prayers or rituals performed as a community, a way of formally closing the day and preparing for the night's vigil. As the night deepens, the atrium vesti would grow quieter still. Most of the inhabitants of Rome would be asleep, their homes shuttered and dark. But for the Vestals, the work was never entirely done. The sacred flame in the temple of Vesta required constant attention 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year after year, century after century. So, even as most of the sisterhood retired to their cells for the night, a new pair of Vestals would be preparing to take up the nocturnal vigil, just as you and Flavia did at the beginning of our story. Before retiring, you would perform your own evening ablutions, perhaps reflecting on the day's service, examining your conscience to ensure you had performed all your duties with diligence and purity. You would carefully fold your garments ready for the next day. Your small cell would once again become your sanctuary, a place of rest and quiet. The transition from the communal activities of the evening to the solitude of your cell would be another moment for mindful reflection. Historians still argue about the emotional and psychological lives of the Vestals. Their 30-year vow of chastity, taken at such a young age, and the severe punishment for breaking it, being buried alive in a subterranean chamber at a place called the Campus Sceleratus. The evil field must have placed immense pressure on them. Yet they were also women of extraordinary privilege, honor, and independence. Did they experience loneliness, regret? Or did the profound spiritual satisfaction of their service, the camaraderie of their sisterhood, and the immense respect they commanded from Roman society provide a fulfilling and meaningful life? The surviving historical sources, mostly written by men, offer few direct insights into their personal feelings. We can only imagine the complex inner world of these remarkable women who chose or were chosen for a life so different from that of their peers. For you, as a Vestal, settling down for the night, perhaps the dominant feeling is one of peace of a day well spent in Vesta's service. The knowledge that the sacred flame is burning brightly, that the rituals have been correctly performed, that the Pax Deorum is secure for another day, would be a profound comfort. The gentle rhythms of the atrium, the familiar sounds of the sacred precinct, the shared purpose with your sisters. These create a world of order and meaning. The evening also offered opportunities for maintaining the physical space of the atrium. While the major cleaning of the temple might happen in the morning, ongoing tidiness was essential. Small tasks like refilling oil lamps, ensuring fresh water was available in the vessels, or checking on stored supplies might be undertaken by Vestals whose turn it was for such duties. The Atrium Vesti was a large household, and like any large household, it required constant management and upkeep to function smoothly. It wasn't all just lofty prayers and tending sacred fires. There was a practical domestic side to Vestal life as well, though even these tasks were elevated by their connection to the service of the goddess. They were in effect the ultimate housekeepers maintaining the home of Rome's most important divine resident. The study of sacred texts might continue into the evening, especially for those Vestals with a scholarly bent. Perhaps there were discussions among the more senior Vestals about the interpretation of ancient prophecies or the correct procedures for obscure rituals that were only performed rarely. The preservation of this knowledge was a critical part of their role. They were not just performers of ritual. They were theologians and liturgists ensuring the accuracy and integrity of Vesta's cult. It's like being part of an ancient think tank dedicated to the study and practice of one specific incredibly important religious tradition. And so, as the city of Rome sinks deeper into the embrace of night, the House of the Vestals remains a beacon of quiet vigilance. The duties of the day, from the public pronouncements of ritual to the private moments of study and contemplation, have been fulfilled. The gentle rhythms of the evening, the shared meal, the soft glow of lamplight, the murmur of looms or quiet conversation give way to a profound stillness broken only by the hushed movements of those preparing for or already engaged in the nocturnal watch over Vesta's eternal flame. Your average Tuesday-a-day woven from threads of ancient tradition, profound responsibility, and serene devotion is drawing to its peaceful close. The last echoes of evening prayers have faded within the atrium Vestae, and a deep, profound stillness settles over the sacred precinct. Most of your sister Vestals have retired to their cells, the small oil lamps extinguished one by one, leaving the colonnades and courtyards bathed in the soft, silvery light of the moon. Or perhaps only the faint, distant glow of the stars if the Roman sky is clear. The bustling energy of the day, the morning rituals, the midday duties, the quiet industry of the afternoon and evening has given way to the hushed, watchful atmosphere of night. For some like yourself, on this particular Tuesday, the day's service is not yet entirely complete. The nocturnal vigil over Vesta's sacred flame is a duty shared in rotation. And as the city sleeps, the heart of Rome must still be tended. If it is your turn for a portion of the night watch, you would make your way once more from your cell through the silent, shadowy atrium towards the small round temple of Vesta. The air is cool now, perhaps carrying a hint of mist rising from the nearby Tiber. The only sounds are the whisper of your own linen robes, the soft padding of your sandals on the stone, and perhaps the distant cry of a night bird or the rustle of some small creature in the atrium garden. The city outside these walls is largely silent, its usual cacophony muted by the lateness of the hour. It's a time when the veil between the mundane and the mystical feels particularly thin. As you approach the temple, the familiar warm glow from its open doorway is a beacon in the darkness, a comforting affirmation that the flame endures. Inside one or two of your sister Vestals, those whose watch preceded yours, would be present, their forms silhouetted against the flickering light of the sacred fire. A quiet exchange of nods, perhaps a few whispered words to confirm that all is well, and the watch changes hands. There is a deep sense of continuity in this act, a ritual handover of responsibility that has been performed countless times, night after night, for centuries. You are stepping into a role played by generations of women before you, each one dedicated to this same unwavering task. The atmosphere within the temple at night is unique. The circular walls seem to enclose you more intimately in the darkness, the single flame on the central hearth becoming the absolute focus of your attention. Its light dances and sways, casting elongated, shifting shadows that seem to animate the very stones. The silence is profound, broken only by the soft crackle and hiss of the burning wood. It is a time for deep contemplation, for a heightened sense of Vesta's presence. You are alone with the goddess, or as close to alone as one can be in her most sacred space. Your primary duty, of course, is to ensure the flame does not diminish, or, heaven forbid, go out. Throughout your watch, you would periodically check its strength, adding fresh, consecrated logs as needed, just as you did in the pre-dawn hours. You would use the sacred tongs and shovel with practiced care, ensuring the fire burns cleanly, without excessive smoke. The purity of the flame is paramount. Any sign of it faltering, any sputtering or dimming would require immediate, focused attention. The responsibility weighs heavily, yet there is also a profound sense of peace in this solitary communion with the fire. It is a living entity, this flame a direct manifestation of the goddess, and you are its dedicated guardian. It's like being a celestial zookeeper for a very rare, very important phoenix, ensuring its eternal life force remains vibrant. But the night vigil is not just about mechanically feeding wood to a fire. It is a time for prayer, for meditation, for maintaining a state of spiritual alertness. You might recite ancient hymns to Vesta, their words familiar and comforting in the stillness. Or you might engage in silent prayer, focusing your intentions on the well-being of Rome, on the health of its people, on the success of its legions, on the wisdom of its leaders. The Vestals were seen as intercessors, their purity and devotion giving their prayers particular efficacy with the gods. Your vigil is a spiritual shield for the sleeping city. You are in essence on the night shift for Rome's soul. The Pinus Vesti, that mysterious inner sanctum containing the sacred talismans of Rome, would also be under your watchful eye. Though its contents are hidden, its sanctity must be preserved. Your presence in the temple, your vigilance contributes to its protection. The thought of those ancient, powerful objects resting so close by adds another layer of awe and responsibility to your nocturnal duties. What secrets do they hold? What power do they emanate? These are questions that might drift through your mind in the quiet hours of the night, though their answers remain veiled. A mainstream historical fact that highlights the gravity of the Vestal's duties, particularly concerning the flame and their vow of chastity, is the infamous fate of Vestals, who were found guilty of incestum, breaking their vow of virginity, or of allowing the sacred fire to be extinguished. For a Vestal convicted of unchastity, the punishment was indeed to be buried alive in the Campus Celeratus. This was a grim ritual. The condemned Vestal, dressed in funereal attire, would be carried in a closed litters, as if already dead, to a specially prepared subterranean chamber. She would be given a small amount of food and water and a lamp, and then the entrance would be sealed, leaving her to perish in the darkness. Her alleged partner in the transgression would be publicly flogged to death in the Forum. For allowing the fire to go out, as mentioned, the punishment was scourging by the Pontifex Maximus. These severe penalties underscored the immense importance placed on the Vestal's purity and their diligence. They were not mere symbols. Their actions or failures were believed to have direct and dire consequences for the Roman state. It makes a modern workplace reprimand for missing a deadline seem rather tame by comparison. The night hours would pass slowly, marked by the gradual consumption of the fire and the subtle shifts in the atmosphere, as the deepest part of the night gives way to the first hints of approaching dawn. You would remain alert, your senses attuned to any change in the flame, any unusual sound, any disturbance in the sacred space. This required immense discipline and focus. Sleep would be a constant temptation, especially in the quiet, warm temple, but succumbing to it was not an option. Perhaps you would stand, or pace slowly around the hearth, or sit on a low stool, your gaze rarely leaving the fire. One quirky or fringe tidbit concerns the dreams of the Vestals. Given their unique spiritual role, their immersion in ancient ritual, and the often intense psychological pressures of their position. It's plausible that their dreams were considered significant, perhaps even oracular. Did they share their dreams with each other, or with the Pontifex Maximus seeking interpretations? Were certain dreams seen as messages from Vesta or other deities? While direct evidence is scarce in a society that placed great store in omens and portents, the dreams of Rome's purest priestesses might well have been considered a conduit for divine communication. Imagine a Vestal waking from a particularly vivid dream and wondering if it was a mere fancy or a prophecy for the fate of Rome. That would certainly add an extra layer of intrigue to what did you dream about last night conversations in the atrium. Beyond the immediate tending of the flame, the night vigil might also offer opportunities for other quiet sacred tasks. Perhaps there are specific nocturnal prayers or libations that need to be performed at certain hours. Or maybe this is a time for carefully cleaning and arranging the sacred implements in preparation for the morning rituals, ensuring everything is in perfect order. The work of Vesta is continuous, a seamless cycle of duty and devotion. The isolation of the night watch could also be a time for profound personal spiritual experience. In the silence and solitude with the sacred flame as your only companion, you might feel a particularly strong connection to the goddess, a sense of her presence, her power, her ancient wisdom. These moments of deep communion would be a source of spiritual strength and renewal, reinforcing your dedication to your sacred calling. It's in these quiet, unobserved hours that the true depth of a Vestal's devotion might be most keenly felt. If you are sharing the watch with another Vestal, there might be periods of quiet companionship, a shared understanding of the weight of your responsibility. You might take turns tending the flame, allowing each other brief moments of rest or focused prayer. The bond between sister Vestals, forged through years of shared service and unique experience, would be particularly strong during these intimate nocturnal hours. They are your colleagues, your confidants, your family in this sacred enclosure. Historians still argue about the exact nature of the sacred objects kept in the Penis Vesta. While the palladium is the most commonly cited, other theories propose different items or a collection of several. Some suggest that these objects were deliberately kept ambiguous, their mystery adding to their power. The fact that only the Vestals had access to them and were sworn to secrecy has fueled speculation for millennia. This secrecy was part of their power, part of their mystique. They were guardians, not just of a flame, but of Rome's deepest, most potent secrets. What would it be like knowing you were in such close proximity to objects that held the very fate of the empire? The thought alone would be enough to keep you awake and alert on your watch. As the first almost imperceptible lightning of the eastern sky signals the approaching dawn, your period of night vigil draws to a close. You have successfully guarded the flame through the hours of darkness. The city of Rome, largely unaware of your quiet service, has been kept safe under Vesta's watchful eye thanks to your diligence. There is a sense of satisfaction of a sacred trust fulfilled. Soon, other Vestals will arrive to begin the pre-dawn rituals we witnessed at the start of our journey, and the cycle will begin anew. You perform one final check of the flame, ensuring it is burning strongly, ready to greet the new day. You might offer a final silent prayer of thanks to Vesta for her protection through the night. Then, as your replacements arrive, you quietly relinquish your post, the sacred duty passing seamlessly to them. Leaving the temple, you step back out into the atrium vesti. The air is cool and fresh, carrying the promise of a new day. The first birds might be starting to sing in the forum gardens. You make your way back to your cell, weary but content. Your Tuesday, which began with the pre-dawn watch and will end with the post-night vigil rest, has been a microcosm of Vestal life, a continuous cycle of sacred duty, ritual, observance, and unwavering devotion. You have tended the flame-prepared the mola salsa, perhaps participated in public ceremony, or safeguarded ancient secrets, studied sacred lore, and maintained the nocturnal vigil. You have lived a day in the heart of Roman sanctity. As you prepare for a few hours of well-earned sleep before the new day's duties begin, you can rest in the knowledge that you have played your part in upholding the ancient traditions, in maintaining the Pax Deorum, and in ensuring the spiritual well-being of Rome. The life of a Vestal virgin was one of immense responsibility and unique privilege, a life dedicated to the service of the goddess and the state. And as the first rays of the rising sun begin to touch the rooftops of the sleeping city, the eternal flame in the Temple of Vesta, thanks to your vigilance, continues to burn a tiny, unwavering beacon of hope and continuity in the heart of a vast empire. And so, dear listener, as our exploration of an average Tuesday in the life of a Roman Vestal virgin comes to its end, allow the quiet sanctity of the Atrium Vesti to envelop you. Let the image of the ever-burning sacred flame, so diligently tended, become a symbol of gentle, unwavering peace in your mind. From the pre-dawn stirring in a simple cell to the meticulous rituals of purification and the preparation of molla salsa from public duties in the bustling forum, to the quiet companionship and study within their hallowed walls, the Vestals lived a life of extraordinary dedication. We've walked with them through their day, feeling the cool stone beneath their sandals, smelling the incense and the sacred herbs, hearing the distant sounds of Rome, and the closer, more intimate rhythms of their communal life. We've glimpsed their unique privileges, and the profound responsibilities they bore, the weight of Rome's spiritual well-being, resting so lightly yet so firmly on their shoulders. The evening brought weaving teaching and quiet contemplation before the night vigil once again called some to the solitary sacred task of guarding Vesta's fire, ensuring its light never failed. As these scenes and sensations begin to soften and recede like the flickering of an oil lamp before it's gently extinguished, let yourself sink deeper into comfort and stillness. The rigorous duties, the ancient chants, the weight of history, these can all dissolve now, leaving only a sense of serene order and profound peace. There are no more sacred flames to tend, no more archaic prayers to memorize. There is only the gentle, inviting darkness of your own restful space. Allow your breathing to slow, to deepen, mimicking the calm, steady rhythm of that eternal fire. Feel the support beneath you, the quiet of the room around you. The life of a Vestal, though lived centuries ago, speaks to us of devotion, of discipline, and of the quiet power found in unwavering service to something greater than oneself. Let these gentle echoes from ancient Rome become a soft lullaby, guiding you towards a deep and restorative sleep, a sleep filled with peace, and perhaps